Kash Patel is there not to serve the American people. He's not there to serve for any type of, therefore, investigation of Epstein. He's there to serve Donald Trump's interest. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump is named amongst those clients. I can't prove that. But it means that Kash Patel's first loyalty is to that man in the White House.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I've got Professor Scott Lucas on the show, a Professor of International and American Studies at University College Dublin. And just a reminder that you can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube page, or you can stream us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Scott, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you for having me here, Maddie.
While the rest of the world really focuses on what is happening in the UK, as Donald Trump has been here for his state visit, who will meet with Prime Minister Keir Starmer today. You and I are going to speak about what has been happening with FBI Director Kash Patel. He has had a busy few days. Yesterday, he faced the House Judiciary Committee, and then on Tuesday, he faced the Senate Judiciary Committee. The takeaways here is that Patel says that the FBI has released everything they legally can in relation to the Epstein files, that there is no credible evidence to suggest that Epstein ever trafficked women for other people, and that there is no political cover-up here. So, Scott, let's start with this Tuesday bombshell claim here from Kash Patel.
You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself?
Himself. There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one?
For the information that we have.
So, Scott, your reaction to Kash Patel saying that there is no evidence to suggest that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked young women to other individuals?
Well, that's a bit of a surprise to me, because there are multiple allegations that Jeffrey Epstein was involved, not only in his sexual abuse of girls, but that he provided those girls to others or for others, whether it be in Palm Beach, where he had one residence, or whether it be in New York, where he had another residence. One can go back to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, his assistant, to look at some of those allegations. One can look importantly at the statements of some of the victims about those allegations. But significantly, Kash Patel admitted yesterday, in fact, almost boasted yesterday, that he had not talked to any of those victims. You can go back to even the limited amount of documents that has come out through the House Committee to see that there are allegations there that this did not just include Jeffrey Epstein, but that there are other people who may be involved in the trafficking of these women.
And we'll get into the next clip. So we're doing a play-by-play of what's really happened for the audience and listeners in case they missed this pivotal last few days at these hearings. So we're going to move on to when Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, he probed Patel on that claim that we just mentioned, the clip that we just play. He read out one name and then described 19 other rich and powerful men allegedly connected to Epstein. This is Massie asking why these can't be released to the public.
According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. And we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from three separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice and FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do.
Yeah, and a bit of context is important here in that Thomas Massie, who's not a liberal, he's not an anti-Trumper. He is very much on the hard right of the Republican Party. He's led the effort amongst those Republicans who want the Epstein files released. He's leading the effort to get the House to call what's a discharge motion, which would force a vote on whether the files should be released. So far, the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, has stymied that, but you only need a handful of Republicans to support Massie, and that changes. So what Massie does yesterday is he says to Kash Patel, as you heard in the clip, look, these are not, there are allegations out here. I've got the name, or I've got a description. He describes the people except for the one name he gives. He talks about people in the music industry, in the finance industry. He talks about at least one senior government official, whether that's a current or former government official, who it could be. Well, we don't know beyond that. In fact, here is, he's describing the great and the good that were involved with Epstein. And Kash Patel's reaction is just significant that, I don't know about this. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I haven't, gone through this. And then he comes up with this deceptive explanation. And I think we do need a minute here to explain about it, because he's hiding behind the pretext that legally the FBI cannot release any of the files and cannot even investigate some of the allegations. Now, here's the reason why that is a dubious argument. Jeffrey Epstein was investigated in two different districts. He was investigated in Florida around 2007, 2008, and prosecutors decided not to proceed with the case. Now, there is an argument that because they decided not to proceed, court records in that case, in other words, the evidence in that case, is sealed. In New York, they did proceed with the case against Epstein, of course. He winds up being convicted. When the court said, look, you cannot release evidence relating to this, they were only referring to a small fraction of the evidence, and that is what relates to what was presented to the grand jury. There's a technical reason for that. But the judge who ruled in that case told the government, in other words, the Trump administration, including the Justice Department, this is only a small fraction of the Epstein material. All the other material is out there for you to make the decision on. So Patel kept hiding behind this, and he kept, at the end, it looked like the world's worst PhD examination, because he looked like a student with it was like these notes spread out in front of him that looked like a deck of giant playing cards, which clearly was not information to work with the Congress. It was like crib lines to try to hold and protect. And he kept getting ripped apart by people on the committee, not just Thomas Massie, but we may talk about a couple of others who significantly are lawyers. So they knew what they're talking about.
And I implore anyone watching and listening to this episode of the Trump Report, you and I, Scott, to actually go and watch a lot of what was happening yesterday in the hearing, because we saw former FBI Director Christopher Wray very much in the limelight, facing similar hearings last year for various things that he was under the microscope for. So it's interesting to see it on the other side of the political aisle, but see it on a bipartisan level. Of course, as you mentioned, Thomas Massie, a Republican, not in Donald Trump's good books, as we know. But as you mentioned, Scott, what Thomas Massie read out was he named one person and then he described the others. And these are those that he says are allegedly reported to have been connected to Epstein's trafficking ring, to potentially have done some incriminating things. If this is correct and these 20 men were involved in this, is that not the Epstein client list?
I think the diversion, and all of this is diversions to avoid getting the full story of Epstein out amongst Trump officials, is that there may not be in Jeffrey Epstein's handwriting or on his computer, like, here are the clients that I worked with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that throughout the Epstein files, however, there are people referred to who may have been clients, right? So all it takes is, a good investigator, say like at the FBI, to go through that massive documentation and say, well, these are the alleged clients that were involved with Jeffrey Epstein. And, and you stress alleged, because until you test that evidence, until you put it through the court proceeding, you can't convict. Thomas Massie, by the way, has named a couple of other people in other interviews. Now, I'm not going to name them here precisely because they're allegations, right? The fact here is what Patel was saying is, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to investigate this, right? And I'll just throw something else because we're going to focus on Epstein. There were a couple of other issues that come up in the hearing which highlight about Kash Patel as a political appointee and what he's doing with the FBI. One is, as Jasmine Crockett of Texas pointed out, he has no qualifications to head the FBI, or he's at least the least qualified person to head the FBI because he's never had any service in the FBI, right? But more damning than that, I think, was the fact that Kash Patel, when Trump was out of power, Patel did serve in the first Trump administration, he drew up effectively an enemies list, a hit list of 60 people, government gangsters, he called them. Of those 60 people, 20 have already either been fired or threatened with dismissal and investigation. And he was being asked about this yesterday and flapping all over the place. Kash Patel is there not to serve the American people. He's not there to serve for any type of, therefore, investigation of Epstein. He's there to serve Donald Trump's interest. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump is named amongst those clients. I can't prove that. But it means that Kash Patel's first loyalty is to that man in the White House.
But then it calls into question, Scott, why does Donald Trump need to protect certain individuals that we don't know who these people are, but we know how Thomas Massie has described them to be high-powered, rich men. Why does Trump need to protect them if he's not even named?
Well, that's a really good question. Let me just tell you a story here in terms of why you might protect these people, beyond the fact that, you're part of their inner circle. I just happened to be reading for the book I'm working on, Michael Cohen. It's a memoir. Now, Michael Cohen was a fixer, Trump's longtime lawyer at the Trump Organization. And Michael Cohen was super, super loyal to Trump. I mean, he defended him. He lied for him. He actually took a criminal charge for him and eventually went to prison for him. But when Michael Cohen came under investigation by the FBI back in 2017, Trump would not support him in the end. Trump broke from him and he said, sorry, mate. And Cohen winds up getting prison sentence. At that point, Cohen flips on Trump and he spills the beans on Trump, including over a whole series of cases involving fraud, as well as the payoff to Stormy Daniels, for which Trump was ultimately convicted, the felony convictions. In other words, if these people are named in the files, if they don't feel they're protected in the files, and if they blame Trump for not protecting them in the files, guess who they could tell investigators about if he happens to have any place in this investigation? They could start talking about Donald Trump.
And it's an interesting position to be in, Scott, because on one hand, these are Trump's peers in the sense that he sits on this high-powered rich list regardless of him being president or not, because of course he's been a millionaire for years and years and years. But on the other hand, you know, he's been trying to prove to his constituents since 2015 that he is not there to make the rich richer, that he's there to make the poor richer, that he's there to take care of his constituents, that he's there to not cut taxes for the rich. So it's almost like you would want to come out and say, hey, I'm going to not so much turn these people in, but I'm not with them. I'm not with them. I'm with you guys. But I want to move on because we're staying with Donald Trump here. And I want to play out this clip, this tense exchange between Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell and Kash Patel over Donald Trump's involvement in the files.
Did you ever tell Donald Trump his name is in the files?
I have never spoken to President Trump about the Epstein files.
Did you ever tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files?
The Attorney General and I have had numerous discussions about the entirety of the Epstein files and the reviews conducted by our team.
Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files?
And we have released where President Trump's name is in the Attorney
It's a simple question. Did you tell the Attorney General that the President's name is in the Epstein files?
During many conversations that the Attorney General and I have had on the matter of Epstein, we have reviewed.
The question is simple.
Who
did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files? Yes or no?
Why don't you try spelling it out?
Yes
if you're
or
gonna mock
no,
me?
Director?
Use the alphabet.
Yes or no?
No? A, B, C?
So your reaction to that, Scott?
Well, the fundamental reaction beyond just, you know, the drama of the exchange, you know, has Trump been named 1,000 times? Has he been named 500 times, 100 times? Is that Kash Patel says, well, I haven't read the documents. You're the FBI director involved in one of the most extensive sexual abuse cases involving girls, and you haven't even read the files that are involved here? What's going on here? Now, I will say something here that it may not just simply be that Patel is trying to protect Trump. It may be that Patel is completely incompetent, because in a completely different moment in the hearing, one of the representatives asked Patel about a case in 2015, which involved a white man, Dylan Roof, killing 9 black Americans in a church in South Carolina. And Patel goes, Dylan Roof? Kash Patel didn't know who Dylan Roof is. I know who Dylan Roof is because it was one of the highest profile mass shootings in recent American history. That combination of ineptitude with the protection of Trump, there is something, here's old man's reference, right? So here, everybody look it up if you're under the age of 50. There's a TV comedy I grew up with in the States called Hogan's Heroes, a World War II comedy hero. There is, for comedic effect, if you can picture this, a German sergeant, a guard at the camp, Sergeant Schultz, and his catchphrase every episode is, I know nothing. I know nothing. Kash Patel was Trump's Sergeant Schultz yesterday. I know nothing. No, I've got all these cards here, but I still don't know anything. I'm going to fail my Viva, but the boss isn't going to get upset with me.
And then finally on this hearing, on the clips of this hearing, Scott, as we analyse what really went on yesterday and on Tuesday, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, she was questioning Patel on whether he would meet with the victims of Epstein.
Epstein, not Biden, not Obama,
President Trump
no one else.
called the entire thing a Democratic hoax. So I would like to ask
the gentlelady's time has expired. I gave her the additional 45 seconds she requested. The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for his 5 minutes.
If you would meet with the women who were sexually abused and raped and groomed at the ages of 14 and 16 years old. Are you going to cover up?
No,
Are you going to continue to cover up for the rich and powerful men, including those that might be on this committee?
I can yell too, Mr. Chairman, but I don't want to yell above this.
The time belongs to the gentleman from New Jersey. I appreciate the gentlelady yielding back.
Are you going to allow them to testify, Mr. Patel?
Go ahead.
Will you allow them to testify to you, Mr. Patel?
Mr. Patel.
So that was a heated exchange, Scott, and obviously Jim Jordan was trying to basically shut them both up. So what was your reaction to that?
Well, Jim Jordan was trying to shut Jayapal up. right? Because what happened is that Patel closed out her time by attacking her. And that was not the only representative he attacked. I mean, he insulted it. Whenever he got in trouble, it's like, you're incompetent, you're inept, you don't serve your constituents. Just like it, and the fact here is, and this is where I turn, not just as an analyst, but just as hopefully a decent human being. How dare he? I mean, absolutely, how dare he? Look, of course, you have to observe, protocols of investigation. You have to observe that to make sure it's a secure investigation. You have to observe those protocols also to protect the victims. But you have to give respect to the victims. And the victims have wanted to be heard on this. They have said that they have not been heard. So who are you as the FBI director to try to give excuses for why you will not take witness testimony from some of the most important witnesses in the case? At the very least, it's dereliction of duty. And of course, it smacks of cover-up.
So what did you think about that? Did you think that, just to wrap up the hearing, do you think that Patel did a convincing, was he convincing enough in trying to deflect any sort of responsibility away from Donald Trump?
He probably succeeded with the Trump camp in that he went into attack mode to cover up the fact that he was on the defensive. He certainly didn't satisfy most of the representatives on that committee, including at least one Republican, Thomas Massie. Whether he succeeded in convincing people who are Trump supporters is one of the two huge questions, because every time you and I talk about Epstein, people are going to come back and say, but MAGA will stick with Trump. He could tell them any lie. His people could tell them any lie, even about sexual abuse of girls, and they'll stick with him. That's still an open question. But the Trump camp's gamble is that they will stick with him, right? They'll stick with him, but they aren't so confident of that they'll release the files in their entirety. They think that their own supporters can be fobbed off, is what it comes down to. But the second question, and the more immediate question, is, can the Republican legislators be fobbed off? At the very least, I think we're going to hit a crunch this autumn as to whether Thomas Massie and those dissident Republicans, or let's call them pro-justice Republicans, are going to get the vote on the release of the files. Now, that doesn't mean the files will be released, because then, of course, you've got to then go to the Senate, and we've got a whole nother, circus to play out there. But it does grab the headlines, it grabs the news cycle, and it puts Trump back on the defensive again, which is the fundamental here is that, this story doesn't go away. It doesn't mean that Trump is found accountable, but it does mean that politically he can't bury it.
Well, Scott, if there is a cover-up, is it safe to say it's collapsing?
There's two ways of handling that, Maddie. One is that you handle the logical way, and that is that logically, yeah, at least it's starting to fragment, because, of course, the birthday card, the birthday book, I should say, including Trump's birthday card, that's massive. I mean, because that's a document that's sitting there. It's not just Trump being named in the Epstein files. That's the document that's there. The questions that open up about what else is being covered up. And there's one other important moment from the hearing very quickly. Congressman Ted Lieu of California referred to a claim from Michael Wolff. I stress claim that Michael Wolff was shown photographs by Jeffrey Epstein of men with girls, and that some of those photographs are of Trump. That Epstein laid them out like his own playing cards, and Wolff described them in detail. Now, of course, Kash Patel says, we don't have those photographs. We've never seen it. No, I don't know. And the fact here is people are going to ask, well, what about it? I think it's fragmentation. I don't think you have a sudden collapse. But again, the whole process of fragmentation is almost in a way is politically damaging, because it means the story is here for weeks and even months.
You're absolutely right. And I think my takeaway from this, Scott, was that there is more to be investigated. As you mentioned, even the claims from Michael Wolff, there's more to be investigated, and whether or not the FBI will actually investigate it, whether or not the FBI will sit down with the Epstein victims and take their claims seriously, take who they name seriously, and then whether the FBI will look into these 20 people that Thomas Massie mentioned, or described, I should say. So there's more to come from this story, and I want to just end this Epstein saga with a clip from this week. Earlier in the week, we saw an interview with Thomas Massie and James O'Keefe where the Republican congressman said that no Republican wants to be covering up for pedophilia.
Is it that Republicans fear Trump so much, but they agree with you privately? How they just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it. That's it in a nutshell. I don't think my colleagues are happy about covering up for pedophiles, but that's what's happening. And it's so sick and twisted. The reason they're doing it is because they're terrified of President Trump's political machine.
So your reaction to that, Scott?
James O'Keefe, he ain't no liberal. James O'Keefe is a very hard right propagandist and was a very pro-Trump propagandist when he was involved with Project Veritas. And again, that's a story I can go into. Fact here is that it shows again that there are those who normally would give backing to Trump, or at least would certainly be on the hard right of the Republican Party. And they're the ones that are putting this stuff out here. And Massie is saying, he's calling on his colleagues, you stand with me here. You stand with me. And he's framed it in such a way which I think it's going to be trouble for Trump, because even MAGA supporters like you and I have values. I might not agree with their values. I might have serious disagreement with their values, but they would claim a set of values. And what Massie is saying to them is do you stand with the dear leader? Or do you stand with the victims of pedophilia? And as much as I disagree with Thomas Massie, this isn't just about Donald Trump. There are women, they're now women, they were girls then, whose lives were destroyed by this. You talk about Virginia Roberts Gifford, who has just passed away earlier this year. You talk about the other victims. Now, Virginia was able to, she spoke out bravely, so she got publicity. Many of these other victims have not even gotten the time of day in terms of what has happened. So do you stand with the victims, the ones who have suffered, the one whose lives have been destroyed, or do you suffer with the potential culprits? Up to you.
And not even just the victims, but do you stand on what Thomas Massie was saying? Do you stand on the side of pedophilia and allowing that to have gone unnoticed, allowing no accountability, no responsibility, no jail time, nothing? And as you mentioned, I've had a lawyer on the show who represented a few of the Epstein victims and represented a few of Weinstein's victims as well. And her takeaway is that, Scott, and this is not an unusual takeaway, is that all it takes is a few victims to get airtime, to come forward, to be able to publicly share their story, for the domino effect to happen, for others to come forward. And obviously there's a bad side to that. Sometimes it means there's false claims. Sometimes there's publicity stunts. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the fact that there are multiple victims of Jeffrey Epstein that have not come forward.
Yeah, and let's really make this provocative while staying on the legal side of things in terms of this. Whether or not Donald Trump is involved with Jeffrey Epstein beyond his friendship, whether or not that happens, Donald Trump was able to escape accountability, at least political accountability, over the Access Hollywood tape when he ran for president in 2016. Donald Trump has been able to escape at this point accountability for the more than 20 women who have testified that they were sexually abused or at least harassed by Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump was found accountable over his sexual assault on E. Jean Carroll, at least to the extent that he was found guilty of defamation in order to pay her $83.5 million in a case which the judge said was, quote, tantamount to rape, unquote. But he has largely escaped accountability in the sense that he is president of the United States. So just over a decade after Me Too, in terms of the rights of women and girls to live their lives, to feel safe, but if for some reason that safety is violated, to get justice, where stand you, America? Where stand you on this? This isn't a Trump, anti-Trump issue. This is a fundamental issue of decency that begins whether you give women the safety and the rights that they accord. Can America still do that?
And it should be a public message that you can be rich, you can be powerful, you can have all the protections in the world, but you can't escape committing crimes. And that should just be the message going forward, that even if it was 20 years ago, you will face accountability. You will face the wrath of the law. You'll face a judge and a jury. So, Scott, you and I could talk about this for days, and we'll keep going. And while the rest of the world focuses on the UK state visit, I think we'll leave it there. And hopefully our audience loved our analytical look into the hearings that have happened in the last few days. So, Scott Lucas, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report.
Thank you, Maddie. Stay safe, stay sane.